Next up is a founder that a lot of people here will know. I'm going to tell a bit of story of how this guy got started because it's really cool. And then I'll call them up. I want to see if you can guess though. So this founder started as a developer overseas, pushing code by walking miles to internet cafes in order to make changes because they didn't have the infrastructure at home. And so they became fascinated with how to make a better developer experience, how to ship code faster. He came to Silicon Valley and iterated on the idea for years, taking him to join startups like Facebook and Code Academy as early engineer. Eventually, he was hand-selected by Paul Graham, who ran Y Combinator, and introduced to Sam Altman, who they then decided to put him in Y Combinator. He started building out his tool to better allow developers to ship code faster and get access. And now his company, I believe, is a unicorn and crushing. It's one of, like, it was one of the few tools I found where I was so blown away when I used it that I was like, I need to text the founder of this and like tweet about it. And it's just like really rare to have that experience. And so I'm really like excited to be doing a fireside chat with them, introducing Amjad Masad, founder of Replit. So we'll take a seat. I'm actually the one interviewing you, so. Turn that on.
Test. Can you hear me? Cool.
Cool. Thanks for joining us, Amjad. So I've got a few questions for you, and then we're going to open it up to the audience as well, if we want to let folks ask questions. I'm sure a lot of developers. How many people here know of the Replit tool and Replit agents? Yeah. Yeah, so if you don't, you realize how big of a deal that product is. Like, that's over half the room, right? What do you think about that? Did you expect to be sitting in a chair with half a room of like top engineers using your product?
No, I'm always amazed that it works. So, genuinely, I think a lot of programmers kind of sort of relate to that. I remember like the first time I made a program. It was actually for my younger brother, who was like 5 years younger than me, and it was like a math program to learn math, and like it was like 1 plus x equals 3, and he has to guess x, and I'm like. And the first thing he did was like he put a letter in instead of a number, and the program crashed. Like, no, you shouldn't do that. And that's how I learned that whatever you try to make, and it's like it will break in production. And so.
Well, this was going to be one of my later questions, but I want to ask it first because it ties in, which is, you guys have managed to ship like a pretty working product. At least the experience I had with Replit Agent, for context, it basically lets me like write code in English, and I shipped a whole production app in a couple hours. I'm not trying to shill the product. I'm just literally, this is exactly what it does. It's really sick. I've also coincidentally lived with multiple of your engineers, and I saw the absolute dumpster fire behind the scene of people like making this company work. How do you ship reliable product, and like, how much failure goes on behind the scene to get there? Just like set expectations with other founders in the crowd.
Yeah, So I think on the one hand, we need to be very reliable in terms of like if you host an application on Replit, it needs to stay up, and it needs to especially if you're a business, like you can lose money if we're down. But you have to kind of figure out with your company what are the places where failure is actually really bad, and the places where failure is okay, right? Like, so on the UI, on the like web things, on the IDE, maybe it's fine to kind of break things every once in a while. And we also developed a culture that's like really good at like incident response and at kind of figuring out what the action items coming out of these incident response. And so like having a really good incident culture is quite underrated. And so if you do that, you're gonna actually be able to move fast, break things, and then the things that you break don't break again with every iteration. And so, and then there's also like the culture of the company. Like we built a company that really empowers people to ship. I know Wade, who joined us when he was like 15 years old. We never were a company that was like hiring people for credentials. We always just hired like the best hackers, and the best hackers were also finding them on Replit. So we'll hire them. They already use the product. They know what needs to be fixed. They know what features we need to be adding, and so we just gave them a lot of freedom to do it. That created some chaos, but then on the back end of the chaos, we had really good platform engineers that were trying to make sure that the platform is steady enough to actually make it so that product engineers are moving faster.
Thank you for the answer. And yeah, shout out to Wade, wherever in the world you are. I don't know, is he 18 yet? Maybe?
I think so.
Well, yeah, that was truly a shocking experience. I was in a hacker house and I met this engineer from Replit who was like under 18 at the time. I thought to myself, this guy's a better systems engineer than I am. This is terrifying. And so it gave me a really big impression of Replit and just like the type of culture you had. The other person was Ferris, who basically lived in the office for quite a while. And so I met these people at Hacker House, and I'm like, these Replit kids are just wild. Like, what is going on? How have you maintained that culture as you've like grown and changed the team over like many years?
Yeah, so I think if you have enough of those weirdos, then like and like I say it in an endearing way, you become kind of, you're not allergic to people who are like strange or outside of the norm. And actually it becomes somewhat of a superpower that you're able to kind of attract these people. You're also able to discover and grow these people. And now like quite a few of the early Replit engineers are starting companies, and I expect them to do really, really well because, they've been sort of molded by how hard sort of the Replit journey has been. And so, but over time, especially as you hire recruiting and HR and things like that, it's very easy to kind of have a more traditional culture because, a lot of the, especially folks in work in people ops, and they're trying to minimize risk, right? So, hiring, a 18-year-old like runaway from home kid is probably quite risky. And this actually happened, I don't know if you met Mason, but he literally like ran away from home. And then we found him in San Francisco, and he was a Replit user. So, but what you have to do when you start hiring these people is like you have to sort of go into the hiring process and make sure that they're actually like not being very, very risk averse. And oftentimes we'll like go cherry pick people and like force them through the process so we can like continue hiring kind of people that are not necessarily like very credentialed. And honestly, like, recruiters who are not following this formula, we just like let them go.
Cool. And yeah, I attest to that. Of the people I've met, I've been consistently shocking encounters with these engineers. Very, very direct, very unique individuals.
I think our team is like quite sort of bimodally distributed, where like we have like this. We hired like quite a few like deep infrastructure people from Google that like very credentialed, and then people who like you probably never heard of any place they worked at.
Cool. Well, I want to ask another question here. This is one you've been asked in a lot of past interviews, but the fun thing is it keeps changing. And I noticed that you had mentioned your answer to this question had changed. So it's on the topic of like where software engineering is heading. Yeah. You mentioned earlier in your career that you believed software engineering would be fully automated, yeah. And then you got into hardware, and then you said, well, that assumption was wrong. It's actually not. Yeah. Well, now when I use your product, I can basically use English and just write an app without any code. I was able to do that on Replit. So have your views around where software development is heading changed in the last year?
Yeah, so it changed a lot. So like in October 2023, I gave a TED Talk about how you're going to be able to program with agents without writing any code. And you're going to be able to spin like multiple agents and kind of like be this sort of like wizard that's like controlling a lot of these entities and like acting more like a product manager or engineering manager. And I said, this will happen sometime before the end of the decade, right? And so, literally like 3 or 4 months later, one of our engineers comes to me and was like, hey, have this like prototype of an agent that can like build like a very simple app. And again, this is like about our culture where like people are empowered to kind of make things. And I looked at it and I was like, it felt like I saw like a sort of like a baby take its first steps or something like that. And like I immediately was able to imagine that this is possible. And so it took a lot of courage, but like we put half the team, half the company on building agents. I felt like, okay, it's the time, and I saw it working, and so we started working on that. And like one of the things that I learned, we were in AI fairly early, and I made a lot of mistakes in how to build products. Typically, the instinct to build product is to build things that are working today, right? So you look at GPT-4 and Claude, whatever. Say, what can they do? What do they unlock? And you go build that. But if you build that, let's say you started today using the sort of the state of the art in browser use or computer use, right? And you kind of hack it and you barely make it work. And then you're about to launch it, and OpenAI operator comes and just make it so that like the hundreds of thousands of lines of code that you've written are obsolete. Now, some of it is hard and unavoidable, but a lot of the times you can actually try to build for future models. And so with agent, we said we're going to take a risk, and we're just assume that that there's going to be researchers are going to be making agents better, and going to be making coding better. And in fact, like 3 or 4 months after we started, Claude released Sonnet, we plugged it in, and the agent started working way, way, way better. So like right now, my view on agents is, well, so what happens in science and technology in general is like once there's like an optimization, like a fulcrum of optimization, all the capital and talents just like go into that. And so when that happens, that acceleration is imminent, right? And right now, that's happening with agents. That's happening with reasoning. And that's both in the open research side and also on the lab side. There's a lot of capital and talent. So I assume 2025 is going to be massive acceleration of agents and reasoning models. And so if you're building a product today, don't build it for today's capability. Try to like think about like build something that sucks today, so that like when you plug in the next model, actually works really well.
Cool. One question on some of the stuff you've seen built. Again, I'm asking questions that you've heard before, but you're so on the frontier that the answer I feel changes often, and I really want to give space for you to kind of shout out the examples. There's been some really big wins built on Replit recently, like legit companies, revenue generating. What's, as of now, the latest one that you're excited about? And a follow-up question is, are you thinking differently about like capturing that value, working with those teams longer term? Because you basically now you went from having like it was a developer tool, help people code, and then they go deploy elsewhere. Now you have your mini AWS empire forming, which I'm sure people have pointed out. And it's like, wait a second, this is an XYC founder who sees traction before anyone else, has people hosting on his infra, sees the revenue. Like, yeah, that's got to be on your mind, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's why I angel invest quite a bit, because we see a lot of startups that at minimum started on Replit, and then they sort of might have moved elsewhere. But like as Replit becomes a more complete platform, and as you said, the deployment product is actually getting better and better and better and growing really fast, then a lot of companies are staying. Like my favorite one so far, because it really captures the essence of what Replit is. There's like this teacher that during COVID had a lot of time on his hands and like decided to learn a little bit of coding, and was really into AI and felt like AI could really change how teachers create lessons and create homework and all of that stuff. So he went to Replit, started working on this idea, launched it maybe like 3 or 4 months after he started working on it, and then probably 8 months later or something like that, they had like 10 million ARR. So someone who's not an engineer goes from like learning a little bit of coding to making a company that's making 10 million ARR all within a span of a year. That's just like mind blowing. And then like, okay, project that forward. What's this idea of like a billion dollars startup, like one person, it just feels like it's imminent. Like maybe it's gonna happen like, in the next 2 years, and I really hope it's gonna be a Replit.
So since you're a founder of a big successful company, I know you're focused on that. If you could tell the audience, like deep in your mind, what do you think is that one person billion-dollar idea? Hypothetically.
I really think that computer use is quite big. Like, people think about it as sort of like a toy, but think about like think about how many people in the economy just sit in front of a computer and do this like pre-scripted thing over and over and over, right? So you have like data entry, you have QA, you have support, you have like, and so I think this is like worldwide. I think this is like at least $1 trillion market, if not, multiple $1 trillion market. And like right now, we're seeing the start of these models that are able to automate these jobs. And I think, the infrastructure is there, and I could totally imagine picking like a role, one of those roles, and building a simple, easy to use product that can automate, let's say, one of those roles for these companies. I think you'll be able to pretty rapidly scale and revenue. I mean, there are all these questions around, will you be able to sell it or what have you? But like, I think if it's compelling enough and it is the first on the market, I think it might grow really fast to something like $1 billion company.
Cool. And yeah, as an example of an interesting frame break is I met a founder who, instead of having retention, they basically start a new app every month and they flip it for $500,000. And so they're actually making $700K or like $500,000 a month revenue with like 60% margins as a 2-person team with no VC funding. Yeah. And they just keep pivoting. And they're like, yeah, retention's dumb. And so that was a big frame break to hear somebody say that. I'm just curious, there's gonna be a lot more, I imagine, of stuff like this.
Yeah, there was like a YC company that was like yesterday, like on Twitter, people discussing it, where he's trying to like buy software companies, fire their employees, and automate them with agents. It's like the Warren Buffett of agents. I don't know. It might work.
Based.ai. Yeah, that's like the, cool. Well, we have a few minutes left. I want to open for a couple questions just because I know so many people here want to ask stuff. And again, there'll be office hours if you're free to answer questions in a more intimate setting. Does anyone have any questions they want to pass on? Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Thanks, Amjad. I know you are very open-minded, both in your talks and on your Twitter or X account. And I also know that you have David Sachs as one of your investors, right? Mm-hmm. Who is now AI Tsar or whatever his title is. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, if you had a chance to meet with Donald Trump and he would ask you, Amjad, like what needs to change in this country? What are a couple of things that you would recommend him in terms of like regulation or immigration or anything else?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably like we'd have to think about it for a bit. But like, is there a way to promote open research? Like I feel like DeepSeek just mugged all of us. Like not just the research labs, but all of us sitting here. Like this company with like a pretty lean team, $10 million or less in like training budget. And was able to like build it. And there's so much cope on Twitter right now. It's like, oh, that's a CCP spyware, or like, no, they lied. Like they actually used a lot more GPUs. The interesting thing is like people are recreating the results. So they published an algorithm called R10 about how to bootstrap a model like R1. And like right now, like a bunch of people, a bunch of like solo hackers are like reproducing the R1 results, right? And so like it's pretty amazing. And it's not us, it's China. And so the reason it's China is because they're still doing open research. And so how do you promote open research? These labs, the reason they're spending billions of dollars instead of $5 million is because they're not doing open research. They're not sharing that information. So I don't know how you do it, but like that's the thing I would like brainstorm about and think about to make it so that like the US is still the center of AI research and not just like the like AI for-profit AI companies. And this goes to the kind of the name of this conference.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you hire these 18, 19-year-old kids, like these super ambitious hackers and so on. I was wondering, like, how do you retain this type of talent? Like, is there like a super high risk that they will just leave and found their own company after like a year or something? And like, what can you do actually about this? Is there anything you can control there?
No, actually, they tend to stay longer than the like professional types. I think one thing we do for retention is being able to detect when someone is sort of like been in one area of the company or one area in the code for a long time, such that they're like starting to burn out and they're not trying new things, and like they're just like in maintenance hell, right? So being able to sort of pluck them out, and sometimes I do that personally, and they'll like work on a project that's super exciting and interesting. And I think that's the important thing, is like novelty every once in a while.
Yeah, so Kyle's mentioned this problem before. When you make something much more accessible, you get a lot of new people, and then your product, when it helps them succeed, they migrate off. So you're kind of, it's like the same problem as like Heroku, I think, like a lot of businesses. So I'm curious how you kind of, it sounds like you saw that problem, and I'm curious like how that journey went from, oh, we have a problem here, how are we gonna fix it?
All right, so the interesting thing about the expanding Replit audience right now is that a lot of them are not engineers. And so a lot of them would not even, and I'm not saying like, we're creating artificial lock-in, but a lot of them, it's just like not worth their time to leave. Also, a lot of them just wouldn't know how to do that. And the other thing, the thing that starts to make Replit different than the existing like PaaS systems is when you're tying like production environments to development environments. For example, we have a feature coming where it takes deployment crashes and runs a Replit agent on them to generate fixes and like send you a notification and saying, hey, saw this deployment crash, here's a fix for that. And so like completing that loop makes it so that people will stick around longer.
I see. So to summarize, there's kind of a critical gap. And if you can get the gap that long, like that large, you actually become irreplaceable. Whereas Heroku, still devs using it, they can eventually learn GCP.
Yeah, so my view is that there's going to be a massive expansion in what it means to be a developer. Like right now, the fastest growing developer population are those who like didn't go to computer science school, and those who are started in the past year or two using ChatGPT and other products like that. So I think that's our opportunity.
That's really cool. Thanks.
One thing I would add too, as kind of a public customer feedback, is I have one app now that I haven't moved off Replit that I actually use, like a personal study card app. Where I basically ingest Wikipedia articles, I turn them into study cards, and I study in Replit. And it's just never been worth the time, even though I could. And it's kind of a weird feeling, because I'm like, oh, am I a programmer anymore? Like I'm supposed to fumble with this, but yeah.
Well, it's sort of the principle of it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Michael Tai, the Data Room on Twitter. I think you're one of the independent voices in Silicon Valley, as well as nationally, from your interview on Tucker Carlson. I was wondering, what are kind of your thoughts on this whole Trump administration and Project Stargate? I mean, I think that's on a lot of people's minds right now. And that $500 billion feels like it's going to suck a lot of the air out of the room for AI. So what do you think is our optimal response to have this decentralized AI future?
Is this recorded?
This isn't recorded. This will be published. So if you want anything offline,
No. It's fine. It's fine.
I knew people were going to come in with the Trump questions. I took the risk because I knew you were the
Look,
tech guy.
I'm very optimistic about the administration, and I've been supportive for a long time. I think Trump, like one of his strengths is like, one is geopolitical. I think he's going to create more peace in the world, and you need more peace. I think he's a deal maker. I think he's going to improve our relations with China. I think this idea of like making China an adversary is like bad, and I think we should be collaborating with them, and I think we should be able to like do research together and all of that. So on the one hand, this really great for this. Trump is really great for that, and then sort of his idea of like tariffs, raising tariffs, and like bringing manufacturing to the U.S. It's kind of interesting, but like I feel like you don't want to be again, you don't want to be competing on like last century's like way of manufacturing. Like we should be thinking about robotics. We should be thinking about like how to like what is the next century's kind of manufacturing is going to be like, right? So I have a feeling that they're like not thinking that way exactly. In terms of like AI infrastructure, I think they have the right ideas around energy and around these like really big data centers. I'm like, it seems like Stargate is kind of rushed as a like an announcement. I think Trump is like trying to get like early wins, and like he's doing everything very quickly, the executive orders or whatever. And so like I'm quite skeptical about the structure that they already put out. I mean, there's a big question is like, where's this money coming from? Like $500 billion is the kind of money that only sovereigns have. Like quite literally, like, very, very few, like it's basically sovereign funds. And so I think we would need to wait and learn. In terms of like, us and like startups and things like that, like I think we're only gonna benefit. Like this idea that like all the value is gonna accrue to like the base layer, I think it's already been proven wrong. Like, Sonnet comes out, everyone moves to Sonnet. Tomorrow, like OpenAI gets better at coding, everyone's gonna move to OpenAI. Like, it's very easy to move between these models. If you build an application that's really good and creates really great, customer experience, and you find a way to create some moat, I think the app layer is gonna create a lot of value. So anything that's happening on the infrastructure layer, I wouldn't really worry about it. And the idea that like AGI is coming soon and is gonna automate everything, I don't think is true. And so I would really think about this like smooth exponential curve of raising capabilities, and you should be building for that. But I wouldn't worry about, anyways, it's like not productive to worry about like, the fully automating everything, because if it happens, there's nothing you could do about it. So I would like plan for the future where we have amazing tools and we're gonna be building like amazing applications.
Thank you. Thank you, Amjad. That'll be it for our Fireside.
Awesome.
And yeah, I encourage you to chat with this brilliant founder throughout the day. Will you be available for some office hours?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So after our speaking sessions, we'll be right over here, and you can chat with Amjad on a more personal note. But thank you so much for making it out.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.